Number 5, the plagues of Egypt. So coming up first is going to be the plagues of Egypt, a classic, horrifying biblical story for Bible fans of all ages. While the Israelites were enslaved in Egypt, the good Lord was trying to show the ruling pharaoh at the time that he'd better let all of the chosen people go or there'd be some serious trouble. Now the pharaoh didn't heed the warning and was divinely punished 10 times, one for each of the pharaoh's false gods. Now maybe you've heard through cultural osmosis that there was a rain of frogs and locusts, but unless you've spent some time in between the pages of the Bible, do you know all the other horrific plagues? Because there was 10 of them, a lot of horror going on. Let's go through them in order. First up, we had the Nile River running red with gore, resulting in dead fish and undrinkable water. Plague number 2, the frogs. You know what a frog is, I don't need to explain that, they're like these little green guys. Then came the lice, next plague, then the flies, kind of similar to the lice really, and then the big livestock plague. This one was kind of fun. It killed off large swaths of farm animals, chickens, cows, others, dead. Then we had everybody's favorite plague, the boils. Painful, disgusting red sores and boils manifesting on the Egyptian skin. Scrumptious. Now the boils were cooled by the next plague, which was a scourge of hail that destroyed the crops and lands that gave life. And then the locusts came. Everybody loved the locusts. They're like little bugs that eat everything. The next plague was a thick, never-ending cloud of darkness, which was probably fantastic for vampires and real dour for anybody else. Now, if you've been keeping track at home, that's 9 plagues, meaning we got one last plague, and that's the death of all firstborns, which afflicted every family in Egypt. Finally, a win for the middle children of the world. The good Lord asked all the Israelites to paint a bit of goat fluid on the door to make sure the angel of death knew they were chill, and not to pox any firstborn children. The plagues of Egypt, it's kind of a story that showcases that when you make God angry, he takes that really, really personal. I think that's literally what they mean when people are talking about divine retribution. It's stuff like this. It's plagues of locusts and frogs. And if you're looking for way more scary videos that might be about Insidious, might be about the Bible, we've got all of that and then some on the channel. Seriously, if you can think it up, we got 2 or 3 videos on it. So click on through, hit subscribe, please ring that little bell as well so you don't miss a single one of our videos as soon as they go up. But do that at the end of this video, because I got 4 more stories loosely related to Insidious coming up for you right now. Number 4, the Witch of Endor. Now coming up next is the story of the Witch of Endor. It's not the Witch King of Angmar, the Lord of the Nazgul, and this isn't involving the forest moon of Endor where the shield generator for the second Death Star was built. It also doesn't have a lot to do with Insidious. We've crossed all 3 of those worries off. I'll tell you what the Witch of Endor was. Now the first king of Israel, Saul, who was a notable good man, was facing a severe crisis. He had disobeyed God and was facing an impending war from the Philistines. So in desperation, Saul sought out guidance from God, but was left on divine red by the big man upstairs and was being ignored. His pleas were unanswered. Saul did what any of us would do in a similar situation when you can't get a line to God. In trouble? Better call the Witch of Endor. Oh, did you think I was going to do like a better call? Never mind. Saul rang up the Witch of Endor, a necromancer of some renown who was able to help Saul conjure the spirit of the dead prophet Samuel, hoping to gain a little insight for the upcoming war against the Philistines. Samuel's spirit appeared and spoke to Saul. Samuel's message was a very grim one, letting Saul know that he was not going to do terribly well in this war and was going to lose the war and also die. The prophet reiterated that Saul's disobedience and rejection of God had led to this outcome, you know? Mind your manners, mind your P's and Q's, maybe you won't die in a war. Overwhelmed by the encounter, Saul fell to the ground in despair. The witch then provided him with a meal before he departed. Now the story of the Witch of Endor serves as a cautionary tale against seeking supernatural guidance outside of God. I think that's a pretty easy moral to follow. Don't contact a necromancer. Be careful with your spiritual mediums. Josh Lambert in the first Insidious film got lucky when he contacted a trustworthy medium, and I don't remember the name of that character, but you might not be. So Josh Lambert, King Saul, pretty similar.
Number 3, the Leviathan. Okay, at first I was like, oh, that's a roller coaster at Canada's Wonderland. No, this vicious monster was actually modeled after this vicious monster. The Leviathan, the second of the great monsters described in the book of Job. This Leviathan, is an absolute massive sea monster who's impervious to human weapons, breathes fire, and emits smoke from his nostrils. So this is a Zelda boss for sure. The Leviathan is probably related to another ancient monster called Lotan, a 7-headed giant serpent who represents primeval chaos, as with pretty much every other biblical creature does. Hey, these things aren't meant to be cute and fuzzy. There's some less exciting theories that insist theories, the Leviathan is just a dramatic interpretation of a crocodile or anaconda or maybe a plesiosaur, resembling something like the Loch Ness Monster. But that doesn't explain the breathing fire thing, or the size. Was this giant sea snake a water dragon? Because apparently it's like 300 miles long. Yeah, terrifying. Scary thing now is many different religions and cultures have their own version of the Leviathan. Tiamat, Hydra, Jormungandr. Maybe this thing was just hunted into extinction. I don't know. What do you think? Number 2, Archangel Michael. It is said that the angels are not humans, but creatures made from God's creation. I've also seen what the Bible describes angels looking like, and it's not handsome people with wings. Apparently, a lot of these things, people really couldn't even describe what they were seeing in front of them. But we'll get to what these things look like in a minute. Of those creatures, Satan, aka Lucifer, is one. The one. However, here is even one creature that Satan fears more than any creature, and that's fellow Archangel Michael. Or Saint Michael. Some say they're brothers, some say they were on the same team for a bit. This is some good stuff, people. Quote, "Now war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him." Revelation 12:7-9. Okay, so hold on. He and them are all down here with us? That's terrifying. Apparently Michael led that army that won, so whatever scares Satan scares the hell out of me as well. Also, all these pictures and statues of him and like window panes are all of him like wielding a giant sword made of light, just stepping on Satan's back as a hero. That's pretty intimidating, not gonna lie. And coming in at the number 1 spot, Ophanim. Okay, so what angels actually looked like apparently was like giant geometrical feathers with eyes and a consciousness. Some had horns, some had hooves, lots of gold and metal colors. This next thing doesn't even make sense to my brain. I feel like this is an anthill trying to understand an iPhone. Quote, "As I looked at the living creatures, I saw a wheel on the ground beside each creature with its 4 faces. This was the appearance and structure of the wheels. They sparked like topaz, and all 4 looked alike. Each appeared to be made like a wheel, intersecting a wheel. As they moved, they would go in any one of the 4 directions the creatures were faced. The wheels did not change direction as the creatures went. Their rims were high and awesome, and all 4 rims were full of eyes all around." Ezekiel 1:15-18. First off, is this thing even a creature? Yeah, everything I see here is an alien. Is this just us trying to process some sort of like energy being with eyes? Because if I saw Lucifer that looks like the hunk on the Netflix show, and then I saw this thing? One of the Dead Sea Scrolls interprets them as angels. Late sections of the Book of Enoch interprets them as class of celestial beings who don't sleep and guard the throne of God. Whatever this thing or things are, it sounds and looks absolutely horrifying. How could you paint that on a ceiling? I would just give up and paint wings and a halo as well. For real though, like that is a spaceship of some sort, isn't it? I mean, I understand the times, maybe the science wasn't there, but this thing is straight out of a sci-fi novel. Number 5, Nephilim. This one I can get behind for sure. How the pyramids were built still baffles me, and reading all about these things at least makes my brain relax for a second. The giants, the talls, the long neck people, the Nephilim. Again, never been a Bible guy myself, so no judgment if you say all this happened, but I'm just catching up on all this stuff. But in short, the Nephilim were like the offspring of angels and human women, according to Genesis 6:1-4 and Jude. The Nephilim are also mentioned in Numbers 13:33, but it is likely that by this time in Israel's history, Nephilim was used as a term for a tall, intimidating peoples. It's plausible that the Nephilim were both half angels and half giants, making them absolutely huge and absolutely super strong. The Nephilim were the children of the sons of gods and daughters of men, and Christian scholars have theorized that the sons of gods were actually these demonic fallen angels who reproduced with women. Being the offspring of partial angelic heredity, the Nephilim were considered mighty men who are of old the men of renown. The ancients. These people were huge, claiming that they were like 5 times the size of an average man. In the Hebrew Bible, a group of mysterious beings or people of unusually large size and length who lived both before and after the flood were called Nephilimus, sometimes translated to giants. Even the fallen ones from the Hebrew Nephil, meaning to fall. Seems like these people were writing about similar stuff, huh? Spooky. Number 4, 200 million horsemen. This next one is not really a creature as much as it's the end of a lot of all of us. All this Armageddon stuff they were saying, that's some pretty strange stuff that's on its way. Book of Revelation stuff, you know? Quote, I saw, as God wanted to show me, the horses and the men on them. The men had pieces of iron on their chests. These were red like fire, and blue like the sky, and yellow like sulfur. The heads of the horses looked like the heads of lions. Fire and smoke and sulfur came out of their mouths. 1/3 part of all man was killed by the fire and smoke and sulfur that came out of their mouths. Word for word. Horsemen or ancient biblical technology? This sounds horrifying. Also, 200 million? That's a lot of flying flaming horses just trucking around the skies and sands like giant tanks, firing fire out of their mouths and nose. As I looked, behold, a stormy wind came out of the north, and a great cloud with brightness around it, and fire flashing forth continually, and in the midst of the fire, as it were gleaming metal. And from the midst of all this came likeness of 4 living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had a human likeness. Okay. You put a Baja hoodie on me at a Dave Matthews concert and hear me saying all that stuff, you probably just think I'm some sci-fi stoner. Nope. This is riveting material, folks. I need to read this thing front to back. Apparently this force was supposed to have taken out, or is going to take out, 1/3 of the entire world's population. I know like 3 things that can do that. Pandemics, missiles, and floods. However, if men and horses showed up with lion heads breathing fire, it's safe to say it's game over.
In at number 3, we have King Herod eaten alive. Here is another example of someone upsetting God and paying the ultimate price. King Herod, a different Herod from the last story, was giving a speech to his people as he usually does. On this day, however, while he was speaking, someone cried out, "The voice of God and not of a mortal." He did not refute the claim that he was a god, and it is said that he was instantly struck down by an angel. Angels are savage. We've learnt this on this channel. They're evil. The story goes on that he did not have a quick death. He was in agonizing pain for at least 7 days. It's like it took God 7 days to build the world. Wow. 7's a good number. Like David Beckham. He was number 7. Not that I believe in God, you know. I don't believe in anything. During this time, it is said he was being eaten alive by worms from the inside out. The worms consumed him after 7 days, and this was his slow, painful cause of death. Imagine a worm consuming you. Worms are evil because you can cut them in half, and then they are 2 worms. That's you just created 2 different things. 2 worms. When 2 become 1. When 1 becomes 2. Like, what the that shouldn't be right. Like, you should never be able to cut something in half and then it becomes 2 living things. Anyway, that's and it's worse than The Conjuring. In at number 2, we have Concubine of a Levite. This story is about a Levite who is traveling with his concubine, a second-class wife. Sucks. Imagine being the second-class wife. I only want to be first class. Along his travels, he finds an elderly man who offers to give them shelter for the night in the town of Gibeah. It is a dangerous place no one should be traveling through. Some dangerous men show up at the house looking to have a good time. The Levite and old man decide to offer up the concubine to appease the men, hoping this will keep them safe from the men. The concubine is taken away by the men for the rest of the night. In the morning, the Levite finds the concubine dead outside of where he had been staying. The man is angry for what they've done to her, so he decides to get revenge on the men, so he dices them up. He then sends those pieces to 12 tribes surrounding Gibeah, which leads them to attack the city. Dicing your girlfriend up to get revenge on her murderers doesn't seem like the best idea, but then again, he did offer her up to them in the first place. So, you're in the wrong. You should be in The Conjuring, and I'll possess you. And finally, in at number 1, we have Ezekiel's Army of the Dead. This next one might remind you more of The Walking Dead than a Bible story. Ezekiel was brought by God to a valley that was full of bones. He walked back and forth among the bones until God asked him if these bones could once again live. God then told him to repeat a prophecy to the bones as he told him it. The bones started to move from around him. They began to form and find the other pieces of the body they had lost. Tendons and flesh appeared on them and skin covered them, but they were not breathing, they were not alive. He then told him the final words to speak, and the dead began to wake up and breathe once more. God told him that these are the people of Israel who had been killed. He was bringing them back to take their rightful place back in their land. Ezekiel then had a full undead army to take back their land which they had lost. In at number 5, Nadab and Abihu burned alive. Nadab and Abihu were brothers chosen to serve the Lord as priests due to their family having a rich pedigree. Their intensive preparation and dedication to serving God. However, when they chose to make an offering to the Lord, they did not know it would be their last. They dressed in their best robes and made their way to the altar to make an offering of incense. It was a known fact that they were forbidden to make unauthorized offerings to the Lord, and it is unknown why they ignored this warning. Once their offering was made, a flame engulfed the altar, and the brothers onlookers watched as they were burned alive. It is said that these deaths were to show the people that there are no sins too small. The brothers should have known that the incense was an unauthorized gift. Something to keep in mind next time you light some incense in your home. Which I never do, so I'm fine. No one's burning me alive, motherfuckers. Coming in at number 4, John the Baptist is beheaded. Now this one starts with some Kardashian-style family drama. John the Baptist had been imprisoned by Herod the Tetrarch for commenting that it was not right that Herod had divorced his wife Vasilis, so that he may take his brother's wife Herodias instead. John commented that it is not lawful for you to have her, which seems like a nice way of putting it. Herod has John imprisoned and was planning on keeping him there. The people saw John as a prophet, and Herod didn't want to cause any upset. For his birthday he had a gathering where Herodias' daughters danced for all of the guests. This pleased him and his guests so much he made an oath to grant her anything she wanted. Prompted by her mother, she asked, "Bring me John the Baptist's head on a platter." Herod was disturbed by this, but he had to keep his oath. That evening John the Baptist was beheaded in his cell. His head then brought on a platter to be presented to Herodias and her daughter in front of all of their guests. It is unclear what happened to the head after this, but that is some crazy revenge for gossiping about the family. That's why you should never gossip. Someone might cut out your tongue.
Number 3, the Book of Enoch. Coming up next today is going to be the stories out of the Book of Enoch, an ancient religious text that is attributed to the biblical figure Enoch. Duh. It's the Book of Enoch. I would assume that he wrote the book. Enoch is said to have been allowed to take a little tour of heaven and shown divine visions of the afterlife and the kingdom of God. Now there's a lot of discrepancy from Christian scholars if this book is considered a canonical text, but it is considered very significant and is unsettling. It does have some interesting mythological aspects to dig into. The most well-known portion of this book that people discuss, people talk about, is referred to as the Book of Watchers. This section describes the descent of angels known as the Watchers. Doesn't that sound ominous? Now these angels became obsessed with human women and their beauty, and I mean, come on, can you blame them? Have you seen human women? Va-va-voom! Anyway, these angels settled with human women and they birthed a new race of beings called the Nephilim. Now the Nephilim are described as being these gigantic, monstrous, hybrid human beings. Kind of like, this is a nerdy reference, but if you've ever seen Attack on Titan, those big things, they're kind of like that. Listen to this quote about how they were corrupting humanity. "And they became pregnant, and they bare great giants, whose height was 3,000 meters, who consumed all the acquisitions of men. And when men could no longer sustain, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. And they began to sin against birds, and beasts, and reptiles, and fish, and to devour one another's flesh, and drink the blood." Enoch was chosen by God to deliver a message of judgment and warning to these fallen angels and their scary giant offspring. He was shown a glimpse of Judgment Day and the establishment of a righteous kingdom on earth, a bright vision of a future where the Insidious franchise is talked about with the same reverence as the Godfather trilogy. Theaters are filling up, people are pre-ordering tickets, they're getting IMAX releases, Blu-rays with special features, there's an extended Insidious universe, it's bigger than The Conjuring, it's crossing over with The Conjuring. Not all of that was in the Book of Enoch, but some of it was. Number 2 is going to be the story of Job. This next story is my personal favorite story from the Bible. I've always found it kind of fascinating, even as an outsider. It's the tragic story of Job. Job is a righteous, God-loving man who lives in the land of Uz. Not like goo, U-Z. Satan, Lucifer, the devil, Beelzebub, Pete Davidson, whatever you want to call him, the devil appears before the Lord one day and proposes a friendly challenge. The devil challenges God and says that Job only reveres the Lord because of the blessing and protection that he enjoys, and that if Job had a terrible life, he wouldn't worship God. So God kind of does one of these and thinks, oh, maybe. So God grants Satan permission to test Job's faith. Seems like a horrible thing to do to one of your subjects, but hey. So Satan rubs his little paws together and gets right to work tormenting Job. Job loses his wealth, Job loses his family, and Job loses his health. However, Job loves the good Lord and his faith does not compromise. So Job's good buddies, his close friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, you know how everybody's got a friend named Zophar, come to comfort Job. But They tell Job that all these things are happening to him because he deserves it, as suffering is a punishment for wrongdoing. Job is like, hey, I didn't do anything wrong. He maintains his innocence and questions why, as a righteous man, he must endure such immense pain. So he presents this case directly to God. He rings him up and to try and understand these reasonings behind his suffering. Why are you doing all this to me? Job remains steadfast that he's innocent and doesn't deserve any of this. So God responds to Job out of a whirlwind. God speaks to Job, emphasizing his divine power, wisdom, and sovereignty over all this creation. God asks Job a series of rhetorical questions to illustrate how little we as humans really know. And Job realizes this and humbles himself before God, puts himself back in his place. In the end, God kind of undoes a lot of that torment. He gives Job his fortune, his family, and he blesses them with more than he had before. Job's faith is vindicated, and he comes to understand that God's ways are just above and beyond his little Joby human comprehension, and he'll never understand what the big guy's doing up there, but he should just sit back and have it happen. It is presented as a very uplifting, optimistic story about having a never faltering faith, but there's something about a story where the divine creator lets an innocent soul suffer immensely just to prove a point that seems kind of terrifying. It makes humans seem like ants, you know? It's very similar to how the family in the Insidious franchise keeps being tormented, but hey, their faith never falters, and they're always keeping their chins up because the Insidious movies are viable, so they're gonna keep making sequels, and you should see the Insidious, The Red Door, that's coming out in theaters already after this video. They didn't pay us for this. Number 1, the Book of Revelations. The Book of Revelations, also known as the Apocalypse of John, is the final book of the New Testament in the Bible. So there will be some spoilers if you haven't gotten around to reading it yet, so skip ahead to the end of the video if you don't want to ruin it. It's a highly symbolic and apocalyptic text that presents a series of spooky visions and prophecies about the end times and the ultimate victory of God over evil. So our book begins with John identifying himself and stating that he received these visions while in exile on the islands of Patmos. He then addresses 7 letters to churches all over the world, offering praise and admonition and encouragement. But the big chunk of the book, the meat of it, what we're all talking about, is these dramatic visions that John sees, these crazy, literally out of this world, these cosmic battles between angels and demons, these heavenly scenes, these things that look like they could be sweet metal album art or like backgrounds from a Doom game, all these crazy battles with the horsemen of the apocalypse, dragons, the Lamb of God. Oh, big stuff, big, really cool stuff that would look awesome painted on the side of a van. The book describes a great tribulation that will come upon the earth, the apocalypse, marked by natural disasters, plagues, persecution of believers, the rise of a beast, commonly interpreted as a symbol of a tyrannical ruler or empire, and a false prophet who deceives people with miracles and leads them astray. Sounds kind of fun. John sees the ultimate victory of God, though. Through all of this, he witnesses the final judgment where the wicked are condemned and the righteous are rewarded, and a new earth is described where God dwells with his people and all suffering and all sorrow are eliminated in this new heaven. And in this new heaven, there's as many Insidious movies as you want there to be. There's endless stories for the Lambert family and that demon that's got like red lipstick on his face and he kind of looks like Darth Maul. And what else happens in the Insidious franchise? I've only seen the first one, but you better see Insidious 5, The Red Door, because it just came out and the Bible was scarier than it.
In 5th place, we have the threats of pestilence. To quote directly from Matthew 24, "And there shall be pestilences." I think I speak for all of us on Earth when I wonder if we've already started to go through with that promise. The last 3 years have been so greatly affected by plague and illness, and I'm not quite sure we will ever have a definite end, which was almost scary enough to put this higher up on my list. Thankfully, with being able to protect so many against the current illness and reopening the world, this isn't the great illness we need to fear. Biblical judgments through disease are said to be supernatural in origin. For example, when God sent boils to Egypt, they broke out instantly on humans and animals throughout the land. The pestilence of Revelation will come from one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Everything the world has gone through in the last few years was natural, not supernatural. God did not cause this virus or the panini it created. Secondly, biblical judgments are against specific sins and sinners. From Pharaoh's obstinacy to Herod's prideful idolatry, divine judgments of the past and future come to those who refuse his word and will. Throughout scripture and history, God deals with us as gently as he can or as harshly as he must. It has been preached that no specific sins cause this virus, nor are those who are afflicted with it more sinful than the rest of us. God is, quote, said to love the elderly and those with pre-existing conditions just as much as he loves the young and the healthy. I worry what could happen in the future that could be worse. Mentally, you do not want to see me cooped up again for another year. And as much as I love a good Sleepy Hollow marathon, I don't need to see a horseman of the apocalypse in person. In fourth place, we have the promises of hate. Once again from the book of Matthew, many will be offended and betray each other. Similar to my last point, I worry this prediction may already be beginning to show in today's society. With the news that comes across my feed every day, I worry for the world as we know it. According to the Bible, where there is conflict, there is the potential for hate, which leads to discord, disharmony, malice, and anger. Hate is a motivator for wicked behavior, and the Bible helps identify hate by showing how indulging in it leads to certain outcomes. Hate is not just an emotion, but a state of being that involves choices, behaviors, and thoughts. It separates people rather than bringing them together, because the one hating sets themselves away from another. Hate is intimately tied in with death, and it is said that someone harboring hate is killing their brother in their heart. When this hate is acted upon, it leads to death. Sometimes that is spiritual or relational, but unfortunately it can also be the ending of the life of another. Hate is dangerous because when taken to its logical conclusion, it is the desire to eliminate the humanity of another. I'd like to hope that we as a society can heal from the hatred in our hearts, avoiding this prediction from coming true.
Number 3, Mammon. Hey, look, there's nothing wrong with wanting a little bit, right? It's nice to want, we all want things. A little money, a little power, Now, for most of us who weren't born into a Fortune 500 lineage, might be a little bit tricky, unless you've got a little bit of help. Maybe like from Mammon, the embodiment of human greed. He's actually a lot more generous than his position as greed demon might suggest, If you give over your eternal soul and pledge yourself to an eternity in his service, he might reward you with great riches. That's a pretty solid transaction. Mammon is thought to originate from an ancient word for wealth, and it's thought that this is where Mammon was first born from, was mankind's inherent desire for wealth and greed twisted out of subconscious want. Curse us for wanting. The Gospel of Luke and Matthew both directly quote, "You cannot serve both God and Mammon," meaning you can't have a pious life on a quest for massive wealth, and taken literally later to mean you can't also serve one of the 7 princes of hell and worship God. That kind of makes sense. Mammon is greedy, real greedy. It's said of all the archdukes and princes of hell, Mammon is more concerned with staring at the gold pavement than any of Lucifer's rebellion or business of the heavens, taken to mean that Mammon does not concern himself with anything that doesn't involve cold hard coin, baby. He's on that grind set 24/7. He's out there getting demon bags. Racks on racks on racks on racks. Now, the demon of greed has taken many forms over the years, most often looking like a fairly normal human sitting on a big golden throne looking down on those who would call for him. He's also been associated with a wolf and is believed to be able to take the form of one for dealing on earth. It's said that part of the arcane ritual to evoke Mammon is to imagine your spirit as a golden wolf calling out to him. Now, if you do invoke Mammon, a little advice from me, just be sure you're being reasonable about this. You never know what happens if you get too greedy with a demon. Number 2, Beelzebub. Okay, the rest of these demons been small fries. Now we're getting into the big hitters. Beelzebub is thought to be one of the first angels to have ever fallen to hell, alongside Leviathan and Lucifer himself. He and Lucifer actually have a bit of an identity crisis, as the two are sometimes thought to be interchangeable. They got like similar haircuts, I think. Some demonologists, and yeah, there are people who call themselves demonologists, argue Beelzebub is another name for Lucifer. Some pose he's one of his most trusted lieutenants. No one can agree, but whatever he is pretty scary. His history is fairly interesting. It's thought that his namesake is a mockery of the ancient god Baal, a Bronze Age god of fertility. Some scholars believe Beelzebub's name comes from Baal-zebub, meaning Lord of the Flies, inferring that the followers of Baal are nothing more than flies worshipping a dung god. The Lord of the Flies sort of ended up becoming Beelzebub's de facto title, with almost all depictions of him featuring flies in ubiquitous amounts. Occasionally, he's even depicted as a giant fly. It's very Kafkaesque. Beelzebub is said to be one of the most powerful demons inside of Hell's domain, capable of great and control over humanity. Beelzebub was cited during the Salem witch trials as the entity that had corrupted and swayed so many women to witchery, so we have him to thank for goth girls, I guess. There's a bit of a discrepancy as to what sin Beelzebub is thought to preside over, with some offerings saying pride and some saying gluttony, but more often gluttony, which I think seems a little more fitting for flies anyway. I've never met a particularly proud fly. And number 1, Asmodeus. Now yes, it probably would have made a lot of sense to have Lucifer or Satan as the number 1 spot on this list. I mean, king of hell and all that. Let's give him an honorable mention. Let's give him a little clap. Let's give him a little equal attention. Yay, Satan. Hail Satan and all that. You're a great guy. Yeah. And let's say he's the number 0 spot, just because I thought it was a little too obvious, and I'm pretty sure most of you know who Satan is. And there's other demons to talk about. You know, I'm all about glowing up underrated demons, some of that, hidden talent. So filling in at the number 1 spot is Asmodeus, one of the princes of hell and the embodiment of the cardinal sin of lust. It's one of the best sins there is. Asmodeus fell from heaven along the other fallen angels, reforming as a prince of hell. Asmodeus is said to have been married to Lilith, the primordial she-demon, famed for her banishing from the Garden of Eden and for destroying Fraser Crane's life. Lilith was cursed and banished for her defilement and depicted as a temptress, and Asmodeus was like, I'm super into that stuff, Lilith. You want to procreate an endless stream of demons into the world and reign over a dominion of chaos? And the rest is wedded bliss. Now, depictions of Asmodeus vary pretty wildly. Occasionally he's a handsome fella, but most commonly he's depicted as a squat, vaguely humanoid creature with rooster legs, tail of a snake, 3 heads, a bull, a goat, and a scruffy demon head as the center. Asmodeus presides over lust with the help of his beloved Lilith. The two tempt humans with madness and desire to ruin people with lechery. Apparently this wasn't enough for him, as some stories also described Asmodeus as having command over the betting halls of hell and is responsible for tempting men's souls towards gambling. So what I'm hearing is that Asmodeus is in charge of lust and gambling, so he probably parties harder than absolutely anybody in hell. I don't know, sounds kind of cool. That's why he's at the number 1 spot today.
Starting with number 5, we have Behemoth. No, not the ride at Canada's Wonderland. I'm talking about the mythological beast that dates back to the beginning of mankind, and whose name is now an adjective for any large or powerful being. The name Behemoth originated historically from the archaic Jewish name for hippopotamus, and is described as a beast from the biblical book of Job. He is a form of the primeval chaos monster created by God at the beginning of creation, being paired up with the other chaos monster Leviathan. And according to later Jewish tradition, both would become food for the righteous at the end time. Hey, if I wind up qualifying as righteous, can I have a funnel cake instead? Once again, not any kind of reference to the theme park. These beings came first, but now I'm kinda in the mood to tackle a roller coaster. Well, I've established that Behemoth was a brutish beast known for incredible strength. Legend says he was originally created to help stabilize the world, and is known to create chaos in humans' lives, just like my roommate. He is said to take the form of a colossally large elephant with pitch black eyes covered in white scales that appear to be falling off, and has teeth the size of Mount Everest. Yeah, that's a little too big for my liking. The direct quote from the book of Job that I mentioned earlier is as follows. 15, behold Behemoth, which I made as I made you, he eats grass like an ox. 16, behold, his strength in his loins, and his power in the muscles of his belly. 17, he makes his tail stiff like a cedar, the sinews of his thighs are knit together. 18, his bones are tubes of bronze, his limbs like bars of iron. 19, he is the first of the works of God, let him who made him bring near his sword. 20, for the mountains yield food for him where all the wild beasts play. 21, under the lotus plants he lies, in the shelter of the reeds and in the marsh. 22, for his shade, the lotus trees cover him, the willows of the brook surround him. 23, behold, if the river is turbulent, he is not frightened. He is confident through Jordan rushes against his mouth. 24, can one take him by his eyes, or pierce his nose with a snare. Behemoth and Leviathan make an appearance in Revelation 13, as they try to fight against God and can be only slain by God. Thessalonians 2:8, Revelation 19:19-20, both these beasts are extremely strong, unruly, and untamable in nature. In Revelation 13:11-12, then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns, like a lamb, and he spoke as a dragon. 12, he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and he makes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose fatal wound was healed. And that's enough Bible babble for right now. In 4th place, we have Vine, an Earl and King of Hell. This Earl commands a a simple 36 legions of demons. Because I know y'all are gonna make me do the math for this one, a legion is anywhere from 3,000 to 6,000 demons. So roughly between 108 to 216,000 demons. Where's my gold star for calculating that? And how are there so many demons? The significance of his name seems to be from the Latin word vinea, vine, which is also the name given to an ancient war machine made of wood and covered with leather and branches, used to overthrow walls. In terms of his appearance, once summoned, he will show up resembling a lion and holding a viper in his hands. Now, I don't do well with snakes, so if you request him to change said appearance, he will present in human form, with long black hair, black wings, and now holding a golden cane. I know there's people out there who might be attracted to this, present company included, but don't take that as encouragement to summon him. Known as one of the most difficult demons to summon and work with, he is also one of the only demons who can identify witches and warlocks without being previously informed about their abilities, along with having the ability to tell the past and future, which I can see is kinda tempting. Vine is insensitive to humanity and cares little for harming those who summon him, making him wildly unpredictable and dangerous to summon, along with having the power to take souls without requiring permission. I repeat, dangerous. Right in third place, we have the prediction of crazy earthquakes. Quoting again from, take a wild guess here. Did you guess the book of Matthews? You're brilliant! The Bible mentions earthquakes in a prophecy that Jesus gave, his words being recorded as follows. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be food shortages and earthquakes in one place after another. Jesus thus foretold that great earthquakes would occur in one place after another at a time when wars, food shortages, and pestilences would also be taking place. Together, these events identify a period in human history known as the conclusion of the system of things, or the last days. Kind of like a puzzle coming together, the three predictions I've listed so far tend to all come hand in hand. The National Earthquake Information Center now locates about 20,000 earthquakes around the globe each year, or approximately 55 per day. As a result of the improvements in communications and the increased interest in natural disasters, the public now learns about earthquakes more quickly than ever before. According to long-term records that date back to 1900, we expect about 16 major earthquakes in any given year. That includes 15 earthquakes in the magnitude 7 range and one earthquake of a magnitude, say, 8.0 or greater. In the past 40 to 50 years, our records show that we have exceeded the long-term average number of major earthquakes about a dozen times. So far, the year with the largest total was 2010, with 23 major earthquakes, the definition of which being 7.0 in magnitude or greater. In other years, the total was well below the annual long-term average of 16 major earthquakes. For example, 1988 had only 7 major earthquakes, and 1989 having 6. Knowing how much devastation a minor earthquake can cause though, never mind a large one, I'd like to not witness this prediction come to fruition. Thanks. In second place, we have the second coming of Christ, otherwise known as the rapture. Many different religions have predicted this ever since it was said that Jesus ascended to heaven thousands of years ago. The Catholic Church believes at the moment of Jesus' arrival, 3 events will happen immediately. The living will pass, the universe will be transfigured, and the dead will be resurrected, judged, and recompensed. After this single instant or moment, the Church does not know what will happen for the rest of eternity. Only that final and eternal judgment by God of the people in every nation will result in the glorification of some and the punishment of others. Personally, this sounds like a nightmare. A single source of instantaneous judgment deciding everyone's fate? Only a single God knowing what day and when this is going to happen? Yeah, once again, hard pass. Also, while the return of a savior may sound good in theory, I'd like to bring up another view on it. How many of y'all enjoy a zombie movie? Yeah, me too. Now, remind me, how do those start? With someone returning from the dead. I'm sure you catch my drift here. Adding on to the plague spot from earlier, just imagine what someone who passed away 2,000 years ago could bring back with them. We also have no clue if other spirits could return with Jesus. As history has shown, troublesome spirits and demonic powers have ways of getting what they want by attaching themselves to innocent beings, or posing as such to trick us. Once again, as much as I love discussing demonic powers that have made their way to Earth, I highly disapprove of anything that could attract them here. I'm begging you here, for the love of all things in the world, leave the gosh dang Ouija board on the shelf at the store. Please. Finally, we have my personal favorite, the Antichrist. Remember a minute ago when I talked about things that could take Jesus' place by posing as him? Yeah, time to elaborate on that front. The technical definition of the Antichrist refers to people prophesied by the Bible to oppose Jesus and substitute themselves in Christ's place before the second coming. The term Antichrist is found 4 times in the New Testament, solely in the first and second epistle of John. The Antichrist is announced as the one who denies the Father and Son. Now look, I don't really believe in a singular male god myself, which I'm sure total shocker to all of y'all, but I don't think that alone would make me or anyone else with similar beliefs the Antichrist. So I'll elaborate more if you don't click off right now. Yes, pay attention. The Antichrist would be the polar opposite and ultimate enemy of Christ. According to Christian tradition, he will reign terribly in the period prior to the Last Judgment. The Last Judgment being the day that Jesus returns to either save or, condemn us, depending on where you fall under his and God's mortal compass. The term Antichrist first appeared in the letters of John. I know, not Matthew's for once. And the fully developed story of the Antichrist's life and reign is found in medieval texts. The revelation to John refers to this figure as the beast from the abyss and the beast from the sea. In the most sustained account of his appearance, he is called the man of sin and son of perdition. He will come at a time of a general apostasy, lack of faith, deceive people with signs and wonders, sit in the temple of God, and claim to be God himself. Finally, he will be defeated by Jesus, who will destroy him by the spirit of his mouth and the brightness of his coming. I guess I'll make a note to keep a pair of sunglasses in my purse from here on out. In terms of direct comparison, with Jesus being born of a virgin by means of immaculate conception by the Holy Spirit, the Antichrist will be born of a lady of the night by means of conception by a diabolical spirit. Although opinions differed as to whether the Antichrist's father will be a man or demon, in either case the Antichrist will be, as commonly noted in the Middle Ages, full of the devil from the time of his conception. He will be born of the tribe of Dan, known as the viper in the road, rather than the tribe of Judah, and in Babylon, not Bethlehem. Like Christ, the Antichrist will grow up in obscurity and begin his open ministry when he reaches the age of 30, gaining followers by giving signs and performing miracles. The signs and miracles once more would be polar opposites of Christ, because, the Antichrist's supposed miracles will only be tricks, with his triumphant reign lasting for around 3.5 years. Like Christ, the Antichrist will make his way to Jerusalem, but unlike Jesus, he will be enthusiastically hailed and revered. During his reign, he will rebuild the temple and sit on the throne of Solomon while he converts the rulers of the earth to his cause. All who resist him will be tortured, and there will be great suffering to an extreme that has not been experienced since the beginning of time. The prophets Enoch and Elijah, who never died but were spirited away to heaven, will arrive to preach against the tyrant, but the Antichrist will slay them. At the end of this allotted 3.5 years, however, the Antichrist will be destroyed by the power of Christ, and after a short amount of time will come the Last Judgment and the end of the world. Not to sound like a broken record, but once again, yikes! I'd rather not have that battle or have this world end. Sure, it's not perfect by any means, and while I could stand here for about an hour and list off a long list of things I'd really love to see improve, I don't want to face an all-up.
Number 5, the Legion. Now maybe this is a cheat to start off this list because this is technically supposed to be a top 5 list, but I think including this one might make it a top 500,000 list, roughly. This next demon is known as Legion, for it is many. The Legion's first appearance comes to us from the Gospel of Mark. That's a very early issue, so if you still have that, hold on to it, collector's value. Wherein Jesus Christ was wandering, encountering a young man who seemed to be possessed by a demon. When Jesus spoke to the man, he asked for the name of the demon inside him so he could exorcise him properly. And the demon spoke back and answered saying, "Legion, for there were many devils inside him." As with any demon, this demon was driving its host to behave like an animal, trying to compel the man to sin, acting violently and aggressive. Now, JC exorcised the demon, and upon being exorcised, asked if it could be transferred to a herd of pigs to live out its demony days, to which Big JC obliged. Now, the Legion is pretty atypical when it comes to demons. It's not the prince of anything, or the embodiment of any one sin. The Legion, as the name might imply, is made up of countless individual little demons, all living inside one person like a big demon jamboree. There'd be so many demons inside you, there wouldn't even be any room for you. The Legion works like a demony hive mind, all moving together in unison. Sometimes Satan's armies are referred to as the legions of hell, but I guess The Legion is its own thing, which must make labeling pretty confusing. No one's exactly sure what sort of demons the Legion are, just that there's a lot of them working together in blissful demon harmony. As well, no one can really determine what the Legion is supposed to look like, but just know if you've ever seen a horde of literally anything, most likely would look like that, and not particularly pleasant. One demon is bad enough, let alone a couple 100,000 all in one place. That's just too many demons per square mile, square inch, square whatever measurement. Too many demons. And if you're looking for way more demons, if that's not enough demons for you, well, we've got stories of all kinds of horned beasts and snake-headed monsters and winged terrors on Top 5 Scary for you, and then some. If demons aren't your jam, we got ghosts, we got ghouls, we got goblins, we got conspiracies, we got anything scary you can think of. Hit subscribe, hit that little bell as well, and don't miss a single scream. But do that at the end of this video, because I got 4 more demons coming up for you right now. Number 4, Belfagor. A demon who's had his heyday in pop culture. Maybe you recognize Belfagor from Supernatural's first fledgling season, all the way back when the boys were wide-eyed and hadn't even died once yet. Or maybe you're a big JRPG fan, maybe you're a Persona fan, and you recognize Belfagor as the perpetually bored demon on the can. And if you're like me, and you never stopped to ask why this enemy in a video game was a demon that was sitting on the toilet, maybe you just figured, hey, it's a video game, there's a talking cat, there's a dream world, you play as a teenager who has a healthy sleep schedule and a healthy social circle, it's not a realistic game, maybe you didn't think about it. But there's a reason for this foul demon's appearance. He's one of the 7 princes of hell, the demonic icon of sloth, and his favorite offering isn't blood or a fresh goat, but a little mud pie. Feces, if you want to get technical. I'm not going to judge, and I'm not going to ask what he's doing with it. Old lore has it that if you wanted to summon Belfagor, you just had to bring him a lot of feces. There's no metric volume ever listed, just a lot. If you do summon him, he'll trade you wondrous riches, expand your ability to discover new things, but at the cost of the temptation of your mortal soul, and also you'll probably never have clean hands again. I'm sorry, I don't usually work so blue. It's the lazy man's comedy, although perhaps that's fitting for the demon prince of sloth. Now, Belfagor has been depicted in all manner of ways over the years. Sometimes he appears as these esoteric things like tree branches, or takes the form of beautiful women. But one wood carving in the 18th century of him sitting on an 18th century toilet sealed his fate forever, and since then he has always been depicted as a horned demon on a porcelain throne. Belfagor, if you're watching this video, I want to make something clear. I'm not making fun of you. I'm just trying to make sense of this. What are you doing with that stuff? Where is it going? What are you doing with it?
Middle of the pack. In 3rd place, we have Pazuzu. If your first response was to say bless you, we have the same sense of humor. You may be familiar with references made to him in The Exorcist and the House of Ashes video game, but we're not talking about Linda Blair's acting today. As an apotropaic entity, he was considered both a destructive and dangerous wind, but also a repellent to other demons, one who might safeguard the home from their influence if he was in the right mood. Remember, if he was in the right mood. Kinda like me sometimes. He is quoted as introducing himself by stating, "I am Pazuzu, son of Anubu, king of the evil Lilu demons. I was enraged in violent motion against the strong mountains and ascended them." Lilu demons are the class to which Pazuzu and his leagues of demons belong. There is also a notable connection to the earlier Babylonian personifications of the 4 winds. These beings, as depicted on several cylinder seals, have wings, and each represents a different direction of the north, south, east, and west winds. It's important to note that noted professor of ancient studies, Franz Wigerman, calls attention to the crooked positioning of the masculine west wind in seals. Franz Wigerman calls attention to the crooked positioning of the masculine west wind in seals, which is similar to the posture in Pazuzu's physical depiction. More connections appear in later seals, as this same bent-over figure takes on talons and a scorpion's tail. The main difference in their depictions is the head, and the conclusion was made that it is Pazuzu's body and not his head that denotes him as a wind demon. Another scholar, Scott Neweagle, asserts that Pazuzu's possession of 4 wings links to the term kipatu, meaning circle, loop, circumference, and totality, suggesting his control over all cardinal directions of wind was inherited from his predecessors. Pazuzu was often depicted with a man's body, the head of a lion or a dog, talons for feet, 2 pairs of wings, a scorpion's tail, and a serpentine phallus. Around now you might be thinking, Pazuzu is a long name, he has to have some sort of a, nickname or other moniker, right? Sure. He's been called the agony of mankind, suffering of mankind, or disease of mankind. Take your pick. This god of wind and plague is known as Lucifer's right-hand man and has the power to control and rule over other evil spirits, being known to bring forth droughts and famine. It is said that he conspired with Lucifer to overthrow God, and they were thrown out of heaven together. He is fond of corrupting the innocent and good, being known to offer help that appears good and benevolent, but actually requires recipients to request more of his assistance, sending them further and further into his debt, sentencing them to an afterlife of eternal agony. See, reality is agony enough, so I'll pass. Our runner-up for today is Zarat, first mentioned in history in 1517, whose deceptive and cunning mind make him one of the most tricky demons you could possibly think of summoning. Due to his name, he is associated closely with Saturdays. Sure, he might be the least known demon on this list, lacking the background detail that emphasizes the other demons, but he is still very much to be feared. He is known as the one who can open all locks, which may seem a little silly on the surface level, but once summoned, he is impossible to escape or to conceal yourself from unless it's on his terms. Targets of Zarat are relentlessly pursued until found, and then presented with imagery until they go mad. He was the last demon to be summoned by known demon hunter and documentarist Pope Honorarius in his grimoire. Honorarius had thoroughly documented the strengths and weaknesses of every demon he summoned during his research into the oncoming War Against Demons, but had only written ability to open locks about Zarat before his untimely death, leaving history to believe Zarat was responsible for this event. Now, I'm not going to spell out how to summon him, because I hope I've made it clear enough by now that I exist to discourage that kind of behavior, but I did find it kind of neat that one would need a nail from an old coffin to do so. Oh, and before I forget, Zarat is invisible when he manifests, making him easy to lose track of. And in first place, we have Beelzebub, Lord of the Flies, Lord of Dung, and God of Filth himself. He is described visually as a smaller and hunched over creature with red or purple skin, ram horns, a forked tongue, and a long tail, along with incredibly powerful wings. Kinda sounds like a D&D character. He often prefers to appear as a fly when summoned, which may sound innocent until you consult history. Flies were believed to have been born from rotting flesh and plagues. According to Christian beliefs, he began his career as a false god, convincing men to worship him and trick them, so he could give faulty advice that would harm instead of helping those in need. Before in the comments asks for a Bible citation, since I haven't been including them for all of the listings today, I'll mention it now. In Mark 3:22, the scribes accused Jesus Christ of driving out demons by the power of Beelzebub, the prince of demons. The name also appears in the expanded version in Matthew 12:24-27, and Luke 11:15, 18, 19, as well as in Matthew 10:25. Jesus knew their thoughts and said to them, "Every kingdom divided against itself will be ruined, and every city or household divided against itself will not stand. If Satan drives out Satan, he is divided against himself. How then can his kingdom stand? And if I drive out demons by Beelzebub, by whom do your people drive them out? So then they will be your judges. But if I drive out demons by the Spirit of God, then the kingdom of God has come upon you." Funny. Hanging around this spooky stuff has me quoting the Bible more than I ever thought I would in my lifetime. Guess I should have paid more attention in my middle school religion classes, or when I was altar serving as a kid, instead of just figuring out the perfect angle to tip a candle at to splash wax on my arm. What? I never said I was a normal kid. Beelzebub is commonly described as placed high in hell's hierarchy. According to the stories of the 16th century occultist Johann Weyer, Beelzebub led a successful revolt against the devil, is the chief lieutenant officer of Lucifer, the emperor of hell, and presides over the Order of the Fly. And I thought I was a workaholic. The 17th century exorcist Sébastien Michaelis, in his admirable history, placed Beelzebub among the three most prominent fallen angels, the other two being Lucifer and Leviathan. John Milton, in his epic poem Paradise Lost, published in 1667, identified the unholy trinity of Beelzebub, Lucifer, and Astaroth, with Beelzebub as the second ranking of the many fallen angels, a quote from him claiming, "Satan except, none higher sat." In simple English, only second place is Satan here. His specialty is in tormenting mankind, causing wars, instigating murders, and known for his ability to place humans under the spell of other demons upon request. One thing historians haven't been able to settle on is which major sin he represents, with some claiming pride, others gluttony, but also some claim idolatry. Personally, since he allegedly originated from being a false god, I'm going to side with idolatry.